I think it's super important to really be thinking about what do you want to do on the other side of this journey, particularly if you're a justice impacted individual. And in this book, Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-Year Prison Term, I'm showing how I use those strategies while going through prisons of every security level for many, many years. And I started my journey back in 1987 when I was, as a result of making some really bad decisions when I was 20 years old. I sold cocaine, short story, and was arrested when I was 23, and I faced a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. And then I went on to make every bad decision a guy could make, meaning I went to trial, I took the witness stand, I perjured myself on the stand saying I didn't do it. I was guilty of everything. But it really wasn't until a jury convicted me that I realized what a bad pathway I'd put my life on, and I needed to start recalibrating. I needed to find a way to get back to a life of meaning and relevance and dignity, and that's what I write about in Earning Freedom. But this really is a message because it's not so much about me, it's about you. If you are facing a crisis with the criminal justice system, if you are inside of the system, now is the time to start thinking about what seeds can you sow that will lead to the outcome you want. And I'm super grateful to many of the leaders who helped me develop this mindset and this concept that could carry me through 9,500 days in prison. Because success after that kind of a crisis doesn't happen by accident. It requires a methodical, deliberate plan, and you have to know that you're always going to face opposition and resistance. And you've got to have a strategy to overcome it. And the strategy that worked for me was transparency. I really made a commitment to say I want to document the journey of all the steps that I have to take to get through this journey with my dignity intact, just like anybody else does. And that requires transparency and a commitment to an elaborate plan. And so our course, Preparing for Success After Prison, is part of that elaborate plan that would culminate with me getting out of prison and beginning to work in advocacy to try and change policies and laws so that all people in prison could work to emerge successfully, to live lives of meaning and relevance and dignity. And in the course, I really emphasize the importance of personal accountability metrics, daily journals. And that's why, because I have to earn trust and credibility, I never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. And I show how to do these daily journals. And that's what I'm going to read to you today. I'm going to read a daily journal from July the 7th, 2023. So I'll flip over here to my screen. And this is about being a part of change. So I'm going to read what the journal said. So the Niskanen Center published a commentary report titled Safer, Smarter, and Cheaper, the Promise of Targeted Home Confinement with Electronic Monitoring. This subject should interest every person in prison, and I want them to know how they can work to advance such arguments. Advocacy requires many voices, including the voice of the justice-impacted person. Although people in prison cannot access the internet, they can find copies of the report on our website at Prison Professors, or they can access the article with the URL below. And then this is a link here to the article of the Niskanen Center. And what it offers are facts to support reform. The scholarly article includes many facts that support this thesis that if a person has a place to live, a job, a support system, and an effective release plan, the Bureau of Prisons can accomplish its mission by transitioning the person to a home confinement setting. Niskanen cites the following statistics. The CARES Act of March 2020 temporarily expanded the authority of the Bureau of Prisons, allowing them to send people to home confinement. As of May 27, 2023, the Bureau of Prisons had transitioned 13,204 people to home confinement. As of May the 1st, 2023, only 22 people that transitioned to home confinement returned to prison for committing a new crime. Based on these facts, Congress should pass a permanent law that will empower the Bureau of Prisons to send people to home confinement, provided that the person can show that he is not a threat to society, has a well-documented and reliable release plan, has a residence and a pathway to employment. Tools for advocacy. While working to advance these arguments, I can only speak for myself, but I like to point out Frederick Douglass's story and how it inspired me to pursue a pathway and a life of advocacy. He used his personal story of being enslaved to fight for the abolition of slavery. I use my personal story of serving 26 years in prison to fight for changes that will liberate others from unnecessary confinement. But I'm only one voice, and I constantly must counter opposition from people who argue not everyone can do what you did when you were in prison. The irony is that adversaries told a different story when I began serving a 45-year sentence. For example, I will never forget my prosecutor telling the judge I should remain in prison even if I lived to be 300 years old. Today, I listen to other adversaries. Donald Trump recently told Fox News that if he were elected president again, he would argue that our country should execute anyone convicted of a drug offense. Governor DeSantis argues that we should repeal the First Step Act, which he labels a get-out-of-jail-free card. Personal experience convinces me that we incarcerate far too many people, and those people serve sentences that are far too long. That isn't only my position. Justice Kennedy said the same thing when he spoke to the American Bar Association, and so did former U.S. Attorney Eric Holder. Ironically, Mr. Holder made the statement to the American Bar Association on August the 12th, 2013. I'll never forget that day because it was the same day that I finished my obligation to the Bureau of Prisons. Since completing my term, I have devoted my career to advocating for changes. And through that work, I have advanced arguments to persuade people with voices far more influential than mine. I've worked with leaders at Stanford Law School, Berkeley, the University of San Francisco, federal judges, U.S. attorneys, state and federal prison directors. To advance arguments further, I need to gather more evidence. I need to build a database showing tens of thousands of people working to prepare for success upon release. That's why we invested resources to build prisonprofessorstalent.com. I am doing the best that I can to make sure that this service is free to people in prison. If they can do their part to cover the cost of sending an email, our team will do the rest. To the extent that we have resources available, we will help people build a profile that shows how they prepare for success upon release. If you want to learn more, send an email invite to interns@prisonprofessorstalent.com, or have your family visit the website to see how we are working to bring more awareness for reforms that will lead to policy and legislative changes. We advocate for expanded use of incentives that will allow people to work toward earning freedom. Bring work release programs to qualified people in federal prison. Provide meaningful access to compassionate release and commutations. And, of course, the big one is to reinstate the U.S. Parole Commission. Now, I want you to know that if I don't know where you're watching or consuming our content, because the vast majority of our people are locked in prisons. We communicate with them through our direct relationships with prison administrators and systems, as well as with tablet companies that allow us to communicate altogether cumulatively to somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 people every day. And the only reason I have currency with a lot of those people is because I served 26 years in prison. But as somebody who did it, I want to say every day I was working to earn freedom. I was working to try and show people, how do you conquer a prison term? It doesn't happen by accident. You've got to take methodical, deliberate steps, and you've got to invite other people to hold you accountable. I've always pursued this path because I got inspired by leaders, really. Leaders helped me learn what should I be doing at the very start of my journey, and that made all the difference in the world. And it's what I want you to be thinking about, whether you're just going into the criminal justice system and you're kind of trying to contemplate, how do I position myself for the best possible outcome? Don't only think about the sentence. I need you to be thinking also about your eventual release and the collateral consequences that follow. And if you take the path of leadership, the path that worked for me, you're going to document your journey. And that's why we built PrismArrestorSTalent.com. We believe that people in prison can become extraordinary and compelling, and if they do, we want to help them earn higher levels of liberty at the soonest possible time. My name is Michael Santos, and I believe in you.